I am Nyatsimba Mutota, the founder of the Mutapa Empire, one of the great pre-colonial African empires. I was born in the early 15th century in what is now modern-day Zimbabwe, and am a member of the Shona-speaking people, whose societies were known for their sophisticated agricultural practices, trade networks, and social structures. Around the mid-15th century, I embarked on a campaign, motivated by the desire to control the lucrative gold trade and expand my influence. I ventured north from my base in the Zambezi River Valley to the Dand region in search of salt, and there I defeated the Tonga and Tabara with my army and established my dynasty. My military and diplomatic maneuvers led me to the region around the Upper Zambezi and the Mashonaland Plateau, where I founded the capital of my empire at a site that became known as Great Zimbabwe. The Mutapa Empire, under my leadership, quickly became a dominant force in southeastern Africa. The empire's wealth is primarily derived from its control of the gold trade, which was facilitated through a network of trading partners across the Indian Ocean. This economic strength allowed the Mutapa Empire to exert significant influence over the regional and international trade routes. Our land thrived with trade. Gold, ivory, and copper flowed like rivers from our hands to those of Swahili traders on the coast, reaching the distant lands of Arabia, India, and beyond. Salt, the gift of the land, was as precious as gold, and it cemented our alliances and power. My rule was not built on trade alone. I was a custodian of our ancestors' wisdom and a servant of the spirits. Through the mediums, I sought guidance to ensure the prosperity of my people. My strength lay not only in my sword but in the harmony I maintained between the earth and the heavens.
The Mutapa Empire was one of the most powerful and influential empires in southeastern Africa. It controlled vast areas of northern Zimbabwe, southern Zambia, and parts of Mozambique, thriving on the wealth generated by gold mining and trade. The Tonga people, on the other hand, inhabited areas in the Zambezi River Valley and along the river in both Zimbabwe and Zambia. They were skilled in fishing, agriculture, and cattle keeping and had a relatively decentralized society. As Nyatsimba Mutota expanded his empire, he came into conflict with various neighboring tribes and kingdoms. The empire's military campaigns were often aimed at subjugating and absorbing neighboring communities to ensure control over key resources, particularly gold and access to important trade routes. The Tonga, being one of the indigenous groups in the area, would have been caught in the path of Mutota's expansion. The Mutapa Empire's territorial ambitions likely led to direct confrontations between Mutapa forces and the Tonga, who resisted encroachment on their land. The Tonga people were known for their resilience and defensive strategies. They had strong spiritual connections to the Zambezi River and its surroundings, and their land was vital for farming and fishing. The Mutapa Empire's demand for control over these resources would have threatened the Tonga's way of life. It's likely that the Tonga mounted resistance to the expanding Mutapa Empire, particularly in the region around the Zambezi River, which was central to their economy and culture. However, specific details of this conflict are scarce. The Zambezi River was not only an important resource for the Tonga, but also a strategic military asset. Both the Mutapa Empire and the Tonga would have used the river and its surrounding areas for trade, fishing, and defense. The Mutapa Empire's control of the river and surrounding territories would have been contested by the Tonga, who were entrenched in their own settlements along the riverbanks. Given that the Mutapa Empire also relied on the Zambezi River for communication and military transport, clashes likely occurred over control of important points along the river. While direct battles between the Mutapa Empire and the Tonga are not well documented, the Tonga's resistance and the Mutapa's military campaigns may have led to territorial disputes and smaller-scale conflicts. Over time, the Mutapa Empire's influence grew, and the Tonga, like other smaller groups, were incorporated into the empire's extensive tribute system, where they were required to pay tribute in exchange for maintaining some autonomy. However, it's important to note that these early conflicts may not have been large-scale wars, but rather localized skirmishes or border disputes, especially given the decentralized nature of both the Tonga and the Mutapa Empire's military structure. The Portuguese began interacting with the Mutapa Empire in the early 16th century, initially as traders and missionaries seeking to establish a foothold in southeastern Africa. However, over time, the Portuguese sought more control, leading to military conflict and strategic maneuvers. The first Portuguese contact with the Mutapa Empire occurred around 1530, when Portuguese traders and missionaries, led by figures like Francisco de Almeida and Afonso de Albuquerque, arrived in the region. The Portuguese sought to establish a profitable trading relationship, primarily focused on gold. The Portuguese initially presented themselves as allies, offering firearms and goods in exchange for gold and ivory. However, their interest quickly shifted towards exerting political influence over the Mutapa rulers. The Portuguese sought to convert the Mutapa elite to Christianity, often using religious influence as a means of gaining power. However, many rulers of the Mutapa Empire resisted Portuguese missionaries, preferring to maintain their traditional religious practices. Over time, the Portuguese established a fort on the Swahili coast in what is now Mozambique, and began to intervene in the internal politics of the Mutapa Empire. They attempted to control the gold trade by influencing the succession of the empire's rulers, offering military support to certain factions in exchange for exclusive trading rights. By the late 16th century, the Portuguese had begun exerting more direct control over the Mutapa Empire's affairs. They sought to control the gold trade and undermine the empire's independence. In response, the Mutapa rulers, particularly Mutapa, the ruler, resisted Portuguese influence. The Portuguese sent military expeditions to challenge Mutapa forces, including blockades and attacks on gold mining regions. These military confrontations weakened the Mutapa Empire, but they did not result in a clear Portuguese victory. During the 17th century, the Mutapa Empire experienced internal instability, with conflicts between rival factions and succession disputes weakening the central authority of the Muin Mutapa. The Portuguese took advantage of this instability, increasing their military involvement in the region.